extraterrestrial hybrids. It's the pharaohs of Egypt, according to a strange research find. Now we know we have mythologies. We have this thing here on the Abydos Temple of Seti with the ancient hieroglyphs of spacecraft. But one thing that really tells us the truth is this: the DNA. The left side has the DNA of Pharaoh Akhenaten, and the right is human DNA. Look at the intensity of the DNA in the Pharaoh Akhenaten left side. Look at the intensity of the DNA, how much more DNA it has. You can imagine what was in the biological entity with all this DNA in it compared to the human DNA, which is on the right. The same thing with their bones. Their bones were much more thicker and denser than our bones, which obviously are less dense and much lighter. So there is a huge difference in the anatomy of these ancient pharaohs, which are not human. Well, they're humanoid, but they were totally different. So, according to DNA results. Now, a new genetic study shows that the genealogy of Egyptian pharaohs was voluntarily genetically engineered by a technologically advanced civilization. Some would call it a definitive proof that the builders of the pyramids had a strong connection to beings coming from elsewhere in the universe. Obviously, we just saw DNA differences from humans. Others, however, deny all this, arguing that none of the following is true and that they are just another conspiracy theory that distorts some real research. As with all the oddities, it's up to the reader to decide. Now, as we read, according to the study from Stuart Fleischman, assistant professor of comparative genomics at the Swiss University of Cairo, his team have published the results of a 7-year study that mapped the genes of 9 pharaohs. If it turns out to be true and not buried, their findings could potentially change the history books of the world. According to the study, Stuart Fleischman, assistant professor of comparative genomics, Swiss University. Fleischman and his team submitted valuable samples of ancient DNA in a procedure called polymers chain reaction PCR. These are the PCR tests that we know. We all know them from, the COVID tests that we take. The polymers chain reaction PCR. In the field of molecular biology, this technique is often used to reproduce and amplify a simple copy of a piece of DNA, giving a clear picture of one's genetic fingerprint. And the result in 8 of the 9 samples seems interesting, but typical. However, the 9th specimen, that belonging to Pharaoh Akhenaten, remember him, he was the one that believed in one god, and not the idols of ancient Egypt. So the 9th specimen belonging to Akhenaten, the enigmatic pharaoh from the 14th century BC, and Tutankhamun's father, was remarkable. A small piece of dehydrated brain tissue became the source of the DNA sample. The test was repeated using bone tissue. The results obtained were the same. One of the perpetrators was a gene called CXPAC5, which is responsible for the development of the cortex in the brain. The anomaly is visible in the image, as we said, concerning the intensity of the DNA. And here we see it in the image. Now, this increased activity in his genome seems to indicate that Akhenaten had a higher cranial capacity due to the need to house a larger cortex. That's why they had bigger skulls. But what kind of mutation caused a human brain to develop? So far, we have not noticed anything similar despite our years in genetics. Could this 3,300-year-old specimen indicate that some ancient genetic manipulation took place? Was it the work of some advanced extraterrestrial beings? Is the mythology of ancient Egypt more than a collection of allegorical tales? Professor Fleischman explains. Telomerase, a genetic enzyme, is consumed by only 2 processes. extreme aging, and extreme mutation. Genetic and archaeological data show that Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, lived for about 45 years. This is not enough to consume the entire telomerase chromosome. This leaves us with an annoying but possible explanation. This explanation or hypothesis is also supported by the fact that electron microscopy analysis reveals signs of nucleotide scars, which reveal signs of DNA helix healing after exposure to potential mutagens. So what happened? Does all this show that Akhenaten, one of the most mysterious pharaohs of ancient Egypt, underwent genetic modification during his lifetime? If nothing else, this claim supports that theory that ancient aliens visited at least once the civilization that lived on the banks of the Nile, Egypt that is. Another interesting piece of evidence provides additional support. In this case, the image showing the microscope photograph of bone tissue of the sample from Akhenaten's skull and the sample of a different mummy of the same age. So this could increase in the strength of skull bone, be an indicator of increased brain development. This is fascinating finding, to say the least, Fleischman said. My team and I have submitted a paper for evaluation by peer scientists and have done repeated tests for several times to make sure that they are accurate. So if this study is correct, it would cause an unprecedented change if aliens were actively involved in the lives of the most powerful people thousands of years ago. Imagine what is happening today. They probably still are here, as a lot of people are telling us. One of them, Paul Hellyer, the former Defense Minister of Canada. So then does that mean that they will return? Maybe again, they never left at all. But the most important aspect of this existence of humans, question mark, who are direct descendants of royal descendants from ancient Egypt, who still possess the foreign genes in their blood, and which were implanted in the genomes of their ancestors. Let's remember that one of the pharaohs, the last pharaohs of ancient Egypt, Pharaoh Nectanebo, was the one that said that the temple of Sete in Abydos, the one with the hieroglyphs of the helicopters and the tanks and the submarines and the spaceships and airplanes, should not be ever demolished, because of the fact that this is where the overlords of Egypt, quote unquote, originally landed. Okay? So, and also we know that the Emerald Tablets are written by Thoth the Atlantean. Thoth, of course, being one of the deities of ancient Egypt, claims that they were extraterrestrials. And I have a playlist for you if you want to see what their technology was. What he describes is really astonishing. So please leave your links, your comments, and this is from a Greek article I translated for you. Thank you for your support, and please leave your comments. Thank you. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.